Salam, sit tight, don't go anywhere. We'll come back to you very shortly. But I now want to bring in Henri Landes, a professor here in Paris at the Sciences Po University, who's also the author of this book, Hello Houston, the US as seen by an angry American. Henri, it's clearly a very historic day for America. What's your immediate reaction to this Trump win?
It's a very historic day, but it's also a very sad day for the United States and for Americans, because somebody who had said and who has behaved with women the way he has, somebody who has talked about Muslims and immigrants from Mexico and Mexicans, someone who has talked about climate change as a hoax, when world leaders, all companies of the world, local governments, every citizens from around the world have finally got around to saying we need to fight against climate change. This is one of the biggest threats to humanity. Someone who has said all of these things should not be supported by the American people, because the American people deserve better and the world deserves better. We are in a system, this day today is the election of an anti-establishment and anti-system candidate. It was not the election of a Republican against a Democrat. And there is an establishment problem, both in Washington, both in the elitist economy, and we have seen reasons for the Americans to be upset, and they have a right to be, about the way American politics has evolved in the last 35 years. And what have they seen? Well, over the last 35 years, we've had an increase of wealth inequality. We've had an increase of private contributions to campaigns. We have had an increase of spending in lobbying. We have had an increase of energy, fossil fuel energy being used, and greenhouse gas emissions, an increase of the utilization of pesticides in agriculture, in industrial agriculture, an increase of obesity and of diabetes among children, an increase also of the distrust of the American people in Washington. And so what else has happened in the last 35 years in the other direction? Well, taxation on the highest wealth, on the highest incomes in the United States, a decrease of union participation in the private sector. And so we take a step back and we don't just look at 35 years of history and realize that it is obvious we need a paradigm shift. And so when Americans express themselves for a big change, it is natural and we should understand that. But Donald Trump is not their guy, because Donald Trump doesn't believe in fighting against climate change, which American youth do. Donald Trump doesn't believe in progress for women's rights and for LGBT. And this young generation of millennials is the most open generation that we have ever had. Youth did not vote for Donald Trump. Students did not vote for Donald Trump. When they talk about a new American dream, they want easier access to health care, not to undo Obamacare, which is what Obama could only do with an obstructionist Republican Party in the Congress. They want less materialism and they want more protection of the environment. And Donald Trump is the opposite direction of history. This is a bad day, and youth and Americans need to mobilize to change this situation in the next 4 years.
Henri Landes, he is, though, sadly, now been voted president. Do stay with us, though. We're coming back to you for more questions in a short while. But for more reaction, we can cross now live to Berlin and speak to Tyson Barker, a former senior advisor at the Bureau of European and Eurasian Affairs. Mr. Barker, thank you very much for being with us here on France 24. Does this Trump win come as a surprise to you?
It definitely comes as a surprise to me. I mean, the expectation was in the U.S. and among the community working on foreign policy in Washington that it would be based on turnout, but the Latino turnout was coming in quite high. The Clinton campaign was pointing specifically to Nevada as a case study for how turnout would look across several states, including Florida and North Carolina. Here in Berlin, it's a mixture of disappointment and disbelief. Trump used Merkel as a kind of international equivalent of Hillary Clinton, a pragmatic, technocratic, inclusive politician that looked to bring people together. He criticized her refugee policy quite heavily during the campaign, said that Germany was becoming overrun, was a disaster, and on the verge of revolution. So I can imagine there's going to be a great deal of unease here in Berlin.
The European Parliament President, Martin Schulz, says it will now be harder to work with the new President, Donald Trump, and the EU's foreign policy chief says the bloc, nevertheless, has to keep on working with Washington. How might this Trump victory change transatlantic relations between the EU and the US?
It alters it fundamentally. Trump, in contrast to Hillary Clinton, who saw, for example, NATO as a relational alliance based on values, Trump sees it as a transactional alliance based on interests. So if he doesn't see that he's getting the kind of defense spending and guarantees that the United States expects, he's calling into question Article 5. He's already done that. That's one. His willingness to work directly with Russia on big issues in a kind of great power game, more realist, will put the unity on sanctions at risk in both Syria and the Ukraine. In TTIP, he's going to be a much tougher negotiator if he approaches TTIP at all. TTIP was not mentioned once in the campaign by either Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump, so it's quite unclear what the future of the trade agenda will hold. And as has already been mentioned, the issue of climate change is simply a non-starter for the Trump administration.
Okay, Tyson Barker in Berlin, thank you very much for joining us here on France 24 on this very historic day for the US. Okay, we can now bring you some reaction from the French foreign minister who spoke a short while ago. Hopefully we can play that soundbite. No? Okay, I'm going to bring in Florence Vimino, who's been following reactions on social media and the internet. Florence, what do you have for us?
Well, let's start with some front pages or headlines, if you will. A real shocker, I guess you could say. Let's take a look, first of all, at the New York Times, talking about this shocking upset as an outsider harnesses voter discontent. Also, you can see Trump triumphs, a very catchy headline this morning. It's on the front page, well, the homepage of the Washington Post here. Politico goes for President Trump, calling it the biggest upset in American history. The billionaire shocked the nation and the world. Now, Huffington Post, a little bit more tragic here, calling it a nightmare, this idea of President Trump. And front pages are just starting to come out. This is the front page of the Daily News for Wednesday in the U.S. Just came out. You can see they're talking about the House of Horrors here with that upside-down flag at half-mast. Now, it's a very different picture coming out of conservative media. This is the homepage of the Wall Street Journal talking about a surge. Trump surges to stun to the stunning election win. So really that word stunning is the key word in both the liberal and the conservative media. The Wall Street Journal says that he managed to do so riding on a wave, a populist wave. Now, there's a lot of gloating going on in the far-right media. This is Breitbart, which has been a big supporter of Donald Trump. You can see they're talking about shock and awesome. This is a movement of ordinary Americans that is stunning the global elite, so taking a little bit of pride out of the fact that everyone is so shocked by this Trump win. The Daily Beast also has an article on the far right here. The alt-right declares a total victory. We are the establishment now. Donald Trump might have stunned a lot of people, but his most ardent fans were not at all surprised by his victory.
Now, Florence, for several weeks, or pretty much, the polls are neck and neck, but in recent days, they gave Clinton, before the polls opened, a very, very slight lead. But obviously, Trump's now won. How did the polls get it so wrong?
That's right, and especially this comes after the whole Brexit scenario, so it seems like,
And Colombia, too.
Exactly, so it seems like, once again, the polls have gotten it wrong. How did everyone get it so wrong? That's what Politico wants to know. These polls and predictive models really failed to predict just how strong Donald Trump was. And this is a very interesting analysis in the New York Times as well. Just wondering, how in the world did Donald Trump win this election? Well, he managed to consolidate support from voters who don't actually, people who don't traditionally go and vote. For instance, white voters that don't have a college degree. It seems like Trump really managed to get the white vote out to two polling stations, whereas Hillary Clinton maybe didn't manage to get as many minorities out to vote. Fascinating article today in the Washington Post about the media. Now, we here, the media, we're part of the media, of course. Many people stunned by this result as well. Fascinating article that says that the media didn't want to believe that Trump could win, and so they looked the other way. They didn't get the fact that this huge, enthusiastic crowd at Donald Trump rallies would actually translate into that many votes. They didn't believe, well, they didn't want to believe, that the America they knew could embrace someone who mocked a disabled man, bragged about sexually assaulting women, spouted misogyny, racism, and anti-Semitism. We in the media just didn't want to believe that he could possibly win, and so we didn't see it coming.
Florence, the president-elect Donald Trump has given his victory speech. That's his first reaction on winning the presidency. People were quick to react to that speech on social media.
That's right, because the tone of his speech was very different from the candidate Trump. President-elect Trump seemed a little bit more measured, I guess you could say. This is a tweet from one observer saying that his supporters were maybe stunned by his calm and quiet. This isn't what they voted for. Where's the bile? Where's the venom? Where's the hatred? Now, other people, Twitter has mainly been a huge area where people have lashed out or celebrated these results. This is someone who's obviously not so happy about what happened. America's worst nightmare was on 9/11. Now it's 11/9, so the 9th of November. Now, many leaders, politicians, have taken to Twitter as well to react. This is the far-right leader Marine Le Pen, one of the first actually to congratulate the new president of the United States, Donald Trump, and his people. Well, the American people, they are free. Interesting to hear from Nigel Farage as well, the former UKIP leader, of course, key in getting the Brexit vote through in the UK. You can see he's saying, looks like 2016 is going to be the year of two big political revolutions. This is going to be bigger than Brexit. And over in Russia, this is the Moscow Times reporting, there was a thunderous round of applause in the State Duma when it became apparent that Donald Trump was going to win.
Okay, Florence Vimino, do sit tight. We'll come back to you, I'm sure, very shortly. But we now want to talk about the world of business and finance. Investors were caught wrong-footed as they expected Clinton to clinch this White House race. They're now bracing for a Brexit 2 scenario. With more, here's Laurent Bechdecker.
Bracing for a Donald Trump presidency, financial markets were gripped by panic as the Republican candidate unexpectedly defeated his Democrat rival in the race to the White House. Stocks had opened on a high in Asia Wednesday, with investors largely projecting a Clinton victory. By the end of the day, however, they had plunged in Korea and China. Tokyo's Nikkei index, meanwhile, closed at minus 5.4%, prompting Japan's finance minister to call an emergency meeting. The US and Canadian dollars also slumped against the yen and the euro, while the Mexican peso plunged to record lows as investors began moving towards safe haven assets such as gold and sovereign bonds on Wednesday.
We can't do that much about the markets. It's clear they'll crash today. The shock is so deep. Trump is politically very green behind the ears. We don't know what he stands for. We don't know if he will push through what he said in the election.
Analysts worry Trump's unpredictability and protectionist agenda could severely affect global trade. The real estate mogul threatened to rip up major international agreements, including NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, but also the TTP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, both landmark deals of the Obama administration.
Okay, that was Laurent Bechdecker reporting there on reactions there on the markets. Let's bring in our guest, Henri Landes. We spoke earlier about about Trump's victory, but let's talk about Clinton now. What went wrong for her?
Clinton had a popularity problem right from the beginning. A lot of it has to do with the fact that she represents a system that is excessively elitist, that is excessively linked to private interests, both in the financial sector, but other industries as well. It is linked a little bit to her emails. That's mostly Republican rhetoric and a problem for the right-wing electorate, but it also had an impact on her perception across the spectrum, giving her this image that the Clintons kind of bend the rules in their favor, are able to navigate a system that most people believe is excessively corrupt. And the fact is that Hillary Clinton was never able to inspire the same kind of hope that Barack Obama did in 2007 and 2008. And even that Bernie Sanders did with youth during the primaries. And Hillary Clinton, some of which is deserved, but a lot of it is undeserved because she had a lot of competency and had a very impressive CV and has dedicated her life to public service. Unfortunately, there were a few aspects of her background, of her program, that did not raise a lot of attention in certain areas of the left-wing electorate, and a little bit too moderate on some positions.
Let's talk demographics, particularly Florida. That was surely a state that should really have gone to Clinton.
Well, historically, it's not a state that has always gone to the Democrats. We saw what happened in 2000. Barack Obama, once again, had a very, very strong effect on the participation rate in minorities. I'm willing to bet that Hillary Clinton did not bring out the African-American vote like Barack Obama did. Who knows whether or not the Latino vote was as block voting as we expected it to be. I believe that Hillary Clinton, as much as she had a very good chance in Florida, did miss a couple of opportunities to perhaps be a bit more aggressive against Donald Trump with regards to the issues. I think Donald Trump did a good job of bringing her into a terrain that was not necessarily favorable for her, bringing the debate down low into issues of values and of behavior. And Hillary Clinton perhaps could have tried to dominate more on the issues side and demonstrate that some of the things that Donald Trump was proposing was absolutely preposterous. Unfortunately, these things panned out negatively for her, and she lost by a relatively thin but sometimes considerable margin in a lot of these swing states, and a nightmare carried out for her.
Staying with Clinton, I want to talk about women. She was meant to be, hopes were high that she would be the first female president after Barack Obama was the first black president. Clearly, not enough women turned out to vote for her, or America wasn't ready to have its first female president.
No, America was not ready to have its first female president. I hope we will have our first female president soon, because the United States is relatively behind on that issue. In fact, the whole Congress is. The United States is ranked 98th in the world with regards to the role of women in politics, and specifically in the Congress. There is a lot of misogyny in American society. That is a reality. That's not the only reason why she lost. But there are strong inequalities for women that wish to have a successful career in politics. It is not a very egalitarian system, politics in general. We have a very small elite of mainly white men that dominate both parties. The Democrats much more diverse in terms of who is participating in the process, and you can see that when you look at the elected officials in Congress, at the local level, et cetera. The Republican Party not really following the evolution of American demographics, which is why a lot of people believe that a synonym or a paraphrase of Make America Great Again could have also been Make America White Again. I don't want to stigmatize those that were voting for Trump for other reasons than just fearing that minorities were taking too much of a place in American society. But it is undoubtedly one of the factors that played into it. So unfortunately, we have a Republican Party that just did not respond to millions of Americans that were promised a little bit more help pursuing the American dream. And the bottom line is their economic and social policies since the 1980s have not helped the average American, and much less the poor American working 2 or 3 jobs and not having any health care. So when he has the flu and gets sick, he's in huge trouble. That happened on both sides. And so when Bernie Sanders came in with a discourse on the left that was very far to the left, and Donald Trump came in with a discourse that was extreme right, but also in some ways extreme left on economic policies, there was a lot of mobilization in his favor from those that were in rural areas or in very urban and industrial areas, or deindustrialized areas, unfortunately, and losing a lot of jobs. There was a lot of mobilization in favor of those two, but Bernie Sanders was not the candidate against Donald Trump, so we'll never know exactly how that would have panned out. Hillary Clinton deserved to be elected tonight, but she had too many things that were creating discontent in the American population.
Okay, just do stay with us. We're going to come back to you, of course. I've got loads more questions to ask you, but we now want to give you a brief pause. If you're just joining us, of course, you're watching our ongoing coverage here on France 24 of the aftermath of those US presidential elections. If you haven't heard yet, Donald Trump has been elected the 45th president of the United States, beating his Democrat rival Hillary Clinton. Luke Brown takes a closer look at the man now who on January the 20th will be sworn in as the new American leader.
Billions of dollars in business-making deals. Now I'm going to make our country rich again.
He launched his bid for the White House in Trump Tower last year and uses his private jet, emblazoned with his name, to fly between rallies. Donald Trump's story of success is at the heart of his political platform, his own gold-plated version of the American dream. He was born in Queens, New York in 1946 to a family of wealthy real estate developers. Aggressive and competitive even as a young man, Trump graduated from military school before joining the family firm, where he proved to have a knack for business and property development. He got his start thanks to a multi-million-dollar loan from his father, an advantage he rapidly capitalized on. From casinos and hotels to golf courses and office complexes, the Trump brand became a multi-billion-dollar empire. And from the very beginning, Trump seemingly reveling in the public eye. His private life, 3 marriages and 2 divorces, splashed across the tabloids. As he became a celebrity in his own right, he acquired major beauty pageants and became the star attraction on the hit reality TV show The Apprentice.
Gene, I think you're fired.
After years on the edges of politics and having flirted with both the major parties, Trump finally launched his White House bid in 2015. His simple message standing out in a crowded field in the Republican Party.
We are going to make our country great again.
His campaign has made a virtue of his success story, despite some notable failures. Trump's business career littered with multiple bankruptcies and unpaid creditors. Despite that, his unavoidable display of wealth is a political attribute. He says his deal-making skills will be a boon on the world stage, but it also frees him up from the constraints of what he hates most, political correctness.
I'm very proud of myself. And Mexico will pay for the wall. Hillary Clinton is the most corrupt person ever to seek the office of the presidency.
Donald Trump is perhaps the most unconventional candidate ever to win the presidency. His supporters vaunt his straight-talking spiel as speaking for the silent majority. His critics, though, decry his scandals and populist promises that have shocked the establishment. In many ways, his successful yet divisive campaign highlights the challenges that he will face now that he's reached the White House.
Okay, that was Luke Brown reporting there. On set, we're still joined by our international affairs editor, Sanam Chantier. And Sanam, I want to ask you, will Trump be a divisive or unifying force for the Republican Party?
Until this point, he's certainly been very divisive for the Republican Party. And as we heard earlier from our reporter who's in Washington, D.C., Douglas Herbert, the party is shaken. They are uncertain as they ever were and certainly shocked. But now the Republicans are controlling the Senate, they're controlling the Oval House, and they have to show some kind of a united front. Certainly we've seen that there have been bad blood amongst Trump and other members like Paul Ryan, the House Speaker, who actually has come out to congratulate him. But it's not a very good day to be Senator Lindsey Graham, who called him a xenophobic religious bigot. But despite this face of unity, we expect to see some more divisive issues coming to surface. The big fiscal boost that Donald Trump expects from lowering taxes, renegotiating trade deals, and of course, the sexual assault allegations that surrounded him. The big question now is, will the Republicans be seeking to brush that under the carpet? And perhaps those that have stuck by his side will be rewarded, people like former New York Mayor Giuliani.
And Sanam, away from Washington and party politics, of course, global leaders have been reacting to Trump's win. What more can you tell us about
This
that?
victory has certainly shocked the international community. First and quick to congratulate were the Front National leader of France, Marine Le Pen, and of course, Nigel Farage of Great Britain. And another unsurprising congratulatory message even came from Vladimir Putin at a time when Washington-Moscow relations are at an all-time low, calling for an end to relations and this crisis state even. Now, for Turkey, it seems a bit of an opportunistic moment as they are calling for the extradition of cleric Fethullah Gulen, who has been accused of being behind the failed coup on Ankara in July. And they're saying, if you do this, this can be a new chapter for our two nations. Another one that I've been following, of course, is Iran, where we have a cautious message from Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif saying we hope he sticks to the pledges that have been made by the US to the international community. And of course, with that, we're talking about that historic nuclear deal, the JCPOA, that Donald Trump says he will rip into pieces. Now, as to whether he backturns that policy, it's yet to be seen.
Okay, Sanam Chantier, our international affairs editor. I know you are hoping to go and do some more research and come back to us very shortly with another update. But now I want to bring back in our guest, Henri Landes, who is from Paris's Sciences Po University. He's, of course, written this book called Allo Houston, which is, the translation is
Houston, we have a problem.
Houston, we have a problem. Under here in French, the just translation is America viewed by an American in anger. Are you angry this Wednesday morning?
I'm angry about this election, about Donald Trump as president-elect, but I was angry when I wrote that book about the last 35 years of American politics, which I believe have considerably led to the rise of wealth inequality, particularly since the 1980s and when we decided that trickle-down economics was going to work well. We now have enough time to look back at the last 30 years and realize it has not worked. Wealth inequality has gone up. All economists are in agreement on this. I believe that they also started in the 1980s, started removing a lot of the safety nets, a lot of the social welfare programs, and a lot of the regulation that protected the environment. Whereas during the 1970s, Richard Nixon was in favor of increasing regulation to protect the environment and established the world's first environmental protection agency. The Republican Party did a complete flip-flop on environmental protection, and that is not positive for the economy. The economy needs to have taking into account protection of natural resources and of the climate. When you degrade those, you degrade the economy in the medium and especially in the long term. So it is a very, very archaic position that they have taken since the 1980s, and even a few candidates, a few elected officials in the party have shown some wisdom on this issue, including John McCain, who was a formidable candidate, particularly in today's context. So with regards to environmental regulation, with regards to wealth inequality, there were disastrous decisions taken from the 1980s onwards, and there was also a tremendous increase in income in the financial sector. We saw stock options come around in the 1980s exponentially. We saw relative wages in the financial sector go way up at the same rate as wealth inequality went up. And it's not like a lot of Americans proportionally benefit from financial wages and the stock market. Only 1% of Americans had 50% of financial products. So it is an extreme factor in contributing to wealth inequality in the United States. We need to think about it.
But we are now 2016, and we do have a new US president,
Yes.
Donald Trump. He's the 45th president of the United States. What kind of country does he inherit?
Well, he inherits 3 decades of degrading American dream. And that is why we are seeing this vote. That is not a protest vote against Hillary Clinton. There is some of it. But it's also a vote of being supportive of Donald Trump because he is somebody that they believe is not able to be bought by lobbyists and by big donors and big industries. They also believe that he is somebody that will change the economy, and we'll come back to why that is not the case.
I'm going to interrupt you because the French president, François Hollande, is giving his reaction now live to Donald Trump's win. Let's take a listen.
Working with her during Barack Obama's presidency, this U.S. election opens a period of uncertainty. I need to look at it in a clear-eyed manner. The U.S. is a major partner for France, and what is at stake here is peace, the fight against terrorism, the situation in the Middle East, economic relations, and preserving the planet. On all of these topics, I will very soon start discussions with the U.S. administration, which will come into office on the 20th of January. But I will do it with sincerity and openness because the positions expressed by Mr. Donald Trump must be confronted with the interests that we share with the U.S. And our common history will help us engage in that discussion. France will also continue on the way of transatlantic cooperation without concessions and in a spirit of independence. The new context after this U.S. election demands that France should be stronger than ever, and take its responsibility in the world as I have done since 2012. It also demands that the European Union should be united, strong, and able to express its opinion everywhere around the world, thinking about the fight against poverty, the fight against social exclusion. And of course, after any election, you need to draw the lessons. A U.S. election has a ripple effect on the rest of the world, and this election comes after a series of other elections. We need to take a clear, sober look at this specific election, and again, in this case, try to understand the concern felt by many peoples, all the peoples of the world, including the American peoples, in the face of the current world situation. And so we need to find the answers. The answers are within us, in our ability to be stronger than our fears and our ability to develop our social models and democracy. More than ever, this election should lead us to take our responsibilities more than ever before as France. And because the EU is the framework within which we work, France will be doing that together with the rest of Europe. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, that was the French President François Hollande expressing, of course, his congratulations to the Republican Donald Trump, who's won the White House race, beating his rival Hillary Clinton. I'm still joined on set by Henri Landes from Paris's Sciences Po University. As a Franco-American, what did you make of Hollande's comments there?
François Hollande, France, and Europe are in a very difficult, challenging situation right now, because what is going on in the United States is a mirror of what is going on in a lot of European countries, France in particular. We saw what happened in with Brexit. The United States was Brexit at the 10th power. France has a situation where the National Front is increasing its popularity and coming closer and closer to a presidential election as well. And if François Hollande wants to give hope to French citizens and demonstrate that an anti-establishment vote is not going to empower and improve the life of its citizens, he's going to have to take some strong measures and analyze very, very clearly what has happened in the United States. And he talked about the relationship between France and the United States, and there is a very meaningful relationship between these two countries. And at the birth of the United States Republic, after the Declaration and the War of Independence, France's philosophers, France's thinkers, and American thinkers very much discussed and exchanged about democracy. And it is about time we had more discussions, fruitful discussions, but honest ones, about how democracy should work, because they are being tested today. And Donald Trump's election is a failed test that we have so far taken. And we need to rectify that by having strong leadership for the majority of citizens in European countries such as France.
But the French President François Hollande has said in the past that the idea that Trump is president or Trump as an individual makes him want to retch, which is makes him want to retch, makes him want to throw up. It's quite a violent reaction to the idea of Trump being in power. Surely that means that Hollande would have preferred Clinton to have won.
Yes, he would have. He would have preferred a social democrat to have won. It would have been a much more alignment with regards to their ideologies, their positions. Donald Trump, I'm not really sure, has much of an ideology. His main conviction is that he himself is an unbelievable person. The fact of the matter is, this is a lot of uncertainty now with how Donald Trump and François Hollande and other world leaders are going to work together. Donald Trump says he hates political correctness. He's already spoken with tremendous political correctness in his victory speech and in the minutes succeeding his election. There is not going to be much of a change there. The fact that he abandoned political correctness during his campaign shows nothing about the kind of revolutionary policies that people think he might lead, just because he said a few things that awoke hatred among some people and frustration. François Hollande is doing a little bit of the same thing when he says, I'm going to try to work with him, et cetera. Now, what he did say, and this is something that the population around Europe and even the United States should appreciate, is he talked about retaining a social model, protecting the social model in France, protecting the planet. He talked about these things in that speech we just saw. And this is something that Donald Trump has not really shown much ambition on. In fact, on climate change, we've talked about it. He has a disastrous position, which is, I don't believe in science. Donald Trump, you're allowed to have your opinion, and scientists are allowed to have their facts. That is the way it is. We cannot move backwards again on something like this. So François Hollande should take some leadership in the next 6 months, and it is actually an opportunity for him to stand up to the United States and show that there is history in their discussion that has led to more fruitful things than the election of a right-wing, xenophobic, misogynistic, fascist opportunist of Donald Trump.
Is that a view that you think other world leaders should share when they come to negotiate with Donald Trump in the future?
Yeah, we saw the president of the European Parliament also talk about his disbelief and his disappointment. We should have several European leaders come up with a progressive and new thinking program to counter this movement that is moving across the United States and Europe. There are some interesting policies that can come up with at the European Union level. It is not because the European Union is in a political crisis that we have to deconstruct it. We just need to think about more cooperative ways of working together, particularly on issues such as the energy transition, such as agriculture. We need to relocalize a lot of these things. It's not because we need to relocalize a lot of our economy, because I agree with that. We should be relocalizing our economy. When studies show when you have a vibrant, local, real economy, people participate much more in local activities, associations, and then you have a more vibrant democracy at the local level. This is fundamental, and we're moving away from that with the negative effects of globalization, particularly financial globalization, and we don't need to also trade agricultural products across the world. That is against social and public health well-being. That is against environmental protection. We should be relocalizing and rediversifying our activities at the local level and not let our countrysides become the same everywhere because multinational corporations come in and decimate them.
Okay, let's just very briefly pause and talk about Donald Trump as a man. Sadly or not, he is now the new US president, but he has, of course, not got the CV of a president.
No, he has the CV of somebody who inherited more than $1 million, apparently made a lot of money, but much less than if he had just put it into an index fund, because he lost almost $1 billion about 20 years ago, didn't pay taxes for 20 years. That makes him smart, according to him.
But in terms of his lack of political experience, how difficult would that be for him now to take over what is arguably the most important position in the world?
It helped him during his campaigns, both of them. The more people saw criticism of the fact that he had no experience as a politician, the more they said, yeah, and that's exactly what we want. And so that definitely is not going to reduce support for him in the next few months. What is interesting is he going to be able to work with Congress? He has a Congress that is of his majority in quotes, because the Republican Party did not select Donald Trump, and Donald Trump doesn't care about being a Republican. He cared about being elected. So it is uncertain as to what his lack of experience is going to do as him in the White House. I believe he might be successful in some of the policies that he wants to implement. I think that nothing can stop him, for example, from writing a piece of paper, signing it, saying France withdraws itself from the COP21 climate agreement. I don't think that's his priority, but he could do that. I think he's going to try and renegotiate himself with other countries on trade agreements. I'm not really sure how he's going to go about doing that. That's a complex issue, but he seems to have the answers to that. I think that his lack of experience is going to show. And what's going to be important is that the Democratic Party rises and can try to take back the House of Representatives and the Senate at some point, so that we have some kind of counter checks and balances here, because we have a Republican Party that is extremely weakened, divided. No matter where you position yourself on the spectrum, we have a very weakened party that is a majority in the Congress, with a president with no experience and who's said things that has angered and worried many people in the country and around the world.
Just very briefly, of course, Clinton has lost. She was Secretary of State, New York Senator, First Lady. She had everything going for her. She's now lost. Where does this leave her?
I think Hillary Clinton is going to take some time after this election, think about her experience in the last 3 decades of public service. It's going to be very hard to look at this result. I think that she is owed by the party a certain degree of gratitude, but I think that she also has a responsibility to recognize what went wrong in this election, to work with other elected officials in the Democratic Party to kind of mobilize the seeds of the movement that we saw in the Barack Obama campaign in 2007, 2008, and in the Bernie Sanders campaign this time around. And I think she now has a responsibility as somebody who is still a leader of this party to mobilize a grassroots movement to create what I believe should be a reminiscence of the 60s movement and 70s on environment, public health, and social equality.
Okay, Henri Landes from Sciences Po University here in Paris, thank you very much for your insight.
Thank you.
We're going to take a very short break now, but do stay with us here on France 24 as our ongoing coverage of the US presidential election continues.